Again, so if you didn't quite follow all the steps, there's a video here that kind of tries to redo this on that same scene. Now, another thing that we usually want to do in 360 environments is to add information panels. So it's often the case that we have some kind of a tour along a set of 360 photos, and we want to give explanations to users about what they are seeing. So we want to provide things like this one that's currently here. How can we do this? How can we create this kind of information panel? Well, actually, there's not much that's new here. So we can just use text and images and make a composition with the objects that we already know about. So in this information panel that you see here, for example, has a few elements. It has a background. So this white area, this is actually just a picture with transparency. So it's a picture, basically a box with rounded corners and then this pointy thing at the bottom. Then we have a title, and this is just text, an element of text. Then we have another image, which is just illustrating the content. And then we have a description, which is also text. So we already saw how to add text. We also know how to add images. So we just need to create a composition. Now, one of the important things to notice and to think about when we have this kind of complex objects, complex elements, it's important to really use nesting properly. So this information panel that you see here, and it's an example below, it's actually a composition of several elements. So the image for the background, then text for the title, another image, and then another text for the description. But these components, so these elements of the information panel are all inside a generic entity. So this outer entity is here just to kind of represent the whole thing. And it's really useful because this outer entity will allow us to position that information panel anywhere on the scene without having to recalculate all the relative positions of the inner objects. So we calculate the positions once of the inner objects relative to their parent, and then we can just move the whole thing. And this is very important, a very important use of nesting. So I won't detail here everything about this information panel. I think it's best if you, after you have the chance of looking at this with more calm, with more time, and then to explain any questions that you have. Just one to note, one specific thing that's important to explain is that I'm using another component, another external component, just to make sure that the panel is always facing the user, and that we don't need to waste much time placing, rotating the panel to make sure that is directly facing the user. So there's a component that does this automatically for us, which is called exactly look at component. So we can add that component with this script, and then in our information panel we can just add this. So this will make this entity, this information panel, be looking at the camera. And so then we don't need to, we just have to position the panel, but we don't need to rotate it because it will be automatically rotated by us, by that external component. And the result, I'll just show you here, the result would be something like this. So we have Of course, this is just a demonstration of the use of the panel. It's not in a particularly interesting position. So the panel itself would have to be aligned with some kind of object of interest in the scene to make sense. But you see that's a complete panel with a picture and text that we can read, so that you know more about that particular object of interest. So we still have a few things to go through. So let's move on. Let's try. Not sure if I'll be able to finish this today. Let's see. So another important thing in 360 environments is that we will most likely need to create several. We will have several 360 photos. So the user will not just look at one photo. You'll have several photos, and we will want our users to be able to move through those locations represented by the 360 photos. One solution would be to do as we just did earlier in the portals chapter, where we could have one HTML file for each photo and just create the scene in a different HTML file. That's okay. The problem with that is that these environments can take some time to load. So if the user is with a headset, so it's kind of immersed in one environment, and he activates one portal to go to a different 360 photo, there will be a loading time. And it can be very, very noticeable. And so this will break the experience of the user. This will break the sense of presence. Because the user will be immediately aware that the content is loading, so he's out of that virtual world, and there will be a second or two where you will just see some blank stuff while the browser is loading the new scene. So that's not very good. A better alternative is to put all the photos on the same scene. And one way to do that is just like this. So we can create several skies, and then we need to place the skies in different locations. Otherwise, they will all be superimposed. So we can just put the skies inside a generic entity, and we can even give it a different ID so that we know to what location it refers. And then we can put each of these outer entities in a different location. And this will create a scene, a single scene in this case, with three 360 photos. So one photo for the classroom, the inside of the classroom, as we were seeing in the previous example, positioned at 0, 0, 0. Another 360 photo on the outside of the classroom, positioned in this case at x equals 10,000, and another photo from the outside at x equals 20,000. Now these positions, they don't really matter. The only thing that matters is that the spheres of the skies don't overlap. So I'll show you the example first. So I'm going to enter the visual inspector again, just to show you that we have those three locations, now those three skies inside those generic entities. And then I'm going to zoom out just to make sure that you understand what's happening. So if we zoom out on our scene, then we can see the three photospheres. And you see that they are positioned in different locations. So actually here in the example, it's the location is a bit different. So it's not 10,000, it's just 1,000 on the X, and the other one 2,000 on the X. So because the sky has a default radius of 500 meters, this means that they are just barely touching. But the only thing that matters is that they really don't overlap. The position itself, it's not important. So, what's the problem with this approach? We need a way to let the user jump between locations now. So how can we do that? Well, we can easily do this with another external component that's called web-centric, and you can add that component with another script. And basically what this component will do, at least in the first stage, is to allow you to jump to any location on your scene. So you'll be able to create a portal to any location, any 3D location on the scene. So with this external component, we can actually create a portal that will take the user to a position that is on the second photosphere, for example. And we can actually try this manually. So in this example that I had just opened here, I'll show you the source code first. So you see here that web-centric component being downloaded here in the head, and then that component needs to be added to the scene. We need to write the attribute name web-centric so that it loads on the scene. And now we can just test the way that web-centric component works. So we can inside, I'm going to reload this. Inside this, ignore this panel for now, it's not important. So we can just now jump anywhere we would like by using this kind of construction in the URL. So we can just append a property to the URL, and this will be interpreted by that web-centric component. So if we write hash symbol and then camera pause from position equals, and then we just write the 3D position where we want to jump to. So let's say, let's jump to this position and see what happens. So, and to jump, we just write this on the address bar and hit the enter key. So what happened here? We jumped to a position that is outside any of those 3D 360 spheres. So we are seeing the outside of a sphere. But if we jump to the center point of one of those spheres, for example, let's change this. Let's jump to the position 1000 on the x-axis, 0 on the y, and 0 on the z-axis. And now we are on a different panorama. If we jump to position 000, we will be in the first one. And if we jump to position 2000, we will be on the third 360 photo. Oh, that's me, by the way. I didn't have time to move away from the 360 camera when I took this. Okay, so with this external component, we can jump anywhere we'd like. So, and if we can do this manually, then we can write this part of the URL as the href of the portal, of the A-link element. So now we have a kind of all our problems solved. So we can just add portals between the scenes by writing things like this. Okay, we just need to make sure that the web-centric component is loaded. I'm not sure not sure if I have, I think I have here an example that does that. So that has the portals included. Yeah, yes. So in this case, the portals, I added the portal as arrows. So when we click, notice Oops, actually this one didn't work. The values are not okay. No, there's something else missing. Okay, let's check the source code. Oh yeah, so I'm missing a few things here. I messed up this example. I'm going to fix it right now. Okay, too many windows. Portal 4. Okay, so let me copy this first. And fix the problem here, and then we need to add it to the scene. Okay. Okay, let's see if it's working now. Okay, now the values are not okay. Forgot to update this also, so let me fix this. Oh no, no, it's okay. No, it's supposed to be like that. Sorry. So I forgot what I meant to do with this example. So now it's okay. So we have our portal, but the portal is not taking us anywhere meaningful. So we have the portal, and when we click, we go outside because there's not yet a second 360 photo here in this scene. But so just to make sure that the portal is working correctly. So the portal took us outside of the photosphere. So I know this is quite a lot, and there's still one small thing to be added, which is how to adjust those portals. So here in the scene, I'm going to reload this. So here in the scene, you notice there's this arrow, this portal represented by an arrow. Here you saw, let me concentrate here on the code. So we already saw how to create a portal and how to give it a specific visual representation. So in that sense, that there's really no novelty here. So we create a link. Notice here the link for the portal. We know now we can use this kind of URL to jump anywhere you would like on the scene. We use this attribute link equals visual aspect enabled false to disable the default representation of the portal. And then we can place another 3D object inside the link, and that object will be used to visually represent the portal. And in this case, I'm just using an image. So the image primitive just shows a bidimensional image, and I'm just showing the image of an arrow. So here's really nothing new. The only thing that's missing is how to adjust the portal to make sure that it's aligned correctly with the scene, and because that's one also a hard thing to do. Now we already saw how to align things with the inspector. But for portals, it's really not easy to do. And so the way that I suggest you do here is by changing a bit the structure of the portal. So instead of just using a link element, I suggest to kind of decompose the problem into two simpler problems. So the first part of the problem is trying to adjust the heading of the portal, which is to say, in what direction the portal will be in relation to the user in that 360 scene. So it's kind of like using a compass. So in what direction should the portal be? And after we have that solved, we can adjust the rotation of the image towards the user to make sure that it's in a sensible orientation. And we can also adjust the distance to the user. But so we decouple, if we try to solve all these issues, so the direction, the heading, and the distance and the orientation on a single entity, this will be much harder, and it will be much harder also to do even with the visual inspector. So we can kind of decompose, and to decompose we need to add an external entity to the link itself. And this external entity is here just to allow us to define the heading. Okay, so we just need the rotation. We don't need to position this entity, just need to rotate. And then the link will have a position just to make sure that we adjust the distance to the user. So here we just change this value, the Z value. And then the rotation is just here to adjust the rotation of the arrow. So this will make it much easier to use the visual inspector to do things. So I'll try to show you how to do very, very quickly. Then you can read that final ending of the chapter and try to understand a bit better. So I'm going to the visual inspector and I'm showing you inside that classroom 360 location, we have that generic entity called hotspot heading. So this is used just to align, just to define the orientation of the hotspot. So this entity is actually centered at 0, 0, 0, so that we can just rotate it. And basically adjusting the heading is just this. In what direction we want the portal to be facing the user. If we are okay with this heading, in this case, because the portal is kind of showing the user the door, so this is the correct location. But so we can do this very easily, like this, or in the chapter I give you an alternative. And then inside this hotspot heading, inside this entity, we have the link. And now we can use the Z position of the link just to adjust the distance to the user. Basically just change the Z position. We can also change the Y position to make it more at eye level or more at the ground. So in this case, I'd set 1 meter from the ground. And then you can just change whether it's further away from the user or closer. And then we can also change the rotation. And here it pretty much depends on what kind of picture you are using. So in this case, it just had the rotation on the y-axis, but this depends on the picture that you are using. But so this will, I think I know it seems more complicated, but I think if you do things like this, of course your scene will have a structure that's a bit more complex, but in the end, I believe it will make things easier to do if you apply the correct hierarchy, the correct structure to your elements. Now we are really running out of time, and I don't want to extend this last beyond the scheduled time. So I'll end here. I will stay available for the next at least 15 minutes, but we will end the session here. And so in the final example just shows you a complete, kind of the complete virtual tour, in this case, in this example. So it kind of shows you something similar to what I expect you to have for the first deliverable of the project. Okay, so a simple 360 environment with some hotspots that allow some portals that allow the user to navigate between them.